Hi, in the next one or two videos, we will be discussing the pulmonary circulation. I'll split it into two parts. The first part or the first video will deal with the special characteristics of the pulmonary circulation. And in the second part or the second video, we will be discussing the pulmonary vascular resistance and its clinical application like pulmonary hypertension. So let's start with the first part, the pulmonary circulation and some special features of the pulmonary circulation. First point, pulmonary circulation is called as the lesser circulation and the systemic circulation is called as the greater circulation. Simply because pulmonary circulation is a short route circulation. As you all are aware that the right ventricle pumps the blood into the pulmonary artery. This is a deoxygenated blood. It goes into the lungs, gets oxygenated and comes back to the left side of the heart. So a short route circulation. That's one reason why it's called lesser circulation. There is one more reason to it which we will see now. But that's the first point, lesser circulation. Second point, again a very basic point, you must have already read about it, that a pulmonary artery which arises from the right ventricle, it carries deoxygenated blood. Even though it's an artery and we know that the arteries carry the oxygenated blood and the veins carry the deoxygenated blood. Here or in the body, there are two places where there is an exception. One is the pulmonary artery and the other one is the umbilical artery. So pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood into the lungs and pulmonary vein carries the oxygenated blood. Well, this pulmonary artery blood is also called as, and I want to explain this term, is also called as mixed venous blood. The deoxygenated blood is also being called, of course it's a venous blood, but it's called as mixed venous blood. So what's with this mixed venous blood? Look, we are talking about the venous blood from all over the body, from various organs and tissues, finally draining into the superior and inferior vena cava and then coming to right side of the heart and right ventricle pumping it into the pulmonary artery, right? Now, the veins which emerge from different organs and different tissues, they contain different volume percents of oxygen. The venous blood which is coming from different organs, those venous bloods will have different oxygen percent saturation or different volume percent of oxygen or simply different oxygen content. For instance, suppose we are talking about the kidney. If kidney consumes less oxygen, kidney extracts less oxygen normally, then the renal vein which is coming back from the kidney will have relatively more oxygen and then it drains into the inferior vena cava. And then think about the cerebral circulation. Brain extracts relatively more amount of oxygen, so the vein which is coming back from the brain will relatively have less amount of oxygen because more was extracted by the brain. And that will drain into the superior vena cava. So you can see the difference now. Superior vena cava relatively has a lower volume percent of oxygen. Inferior vena cava has relatively a higher volume percent of oxygen. And then they finally mix into the right atrium first and then right ventricle. I mean, they first come into right atrium, then finally right ventricle. In the right ventricle, those blood samples or those venous bloods will get completely mixed and then it will be pumped into the pulmonary artery. Therefore, we are using the term mixed venous blood. Now this becomes the representative sample for the entire body, because the venous blood coming from each organ having different oxygen content, it got mixed in the right side of the heart and then it came into the pulmonary artery. So therefore we use the term mixed venous blood. We are saying that this now is a representative sample for the entire body. I mean, if I were to say venous blood for the entire body, then I will collect it from the pulmonary artery. So that's the term for mixed venous blood. Look, there was no problem with the arterial blood because all arteries essentially contain the same volume of oxygen, same volume percent or same saturation of oxygen till the blood reaches tissues. So no problem, you can collect any sample from any artery and it will be representative sample for the entire body. But venous blood, if you want a representative sample for the that represents the entire body's venous blood, then you collect it from the pulmonary artery. And I told you the reason why it is so, because different veins have different volume percent of oxygen and it depends on how much oxygen was extracted by that particular organ. If it extracts more oxygen, then the vein coming from that organ will have less oxygen naturally. So that's the reason why it's called as mixed venous blood. But our basic point was that pulmonary artery contains deoxygenated blood and the other one is umbilical artery, as I mentioned. Right. Now moving on, the next point is that the pulmonary circulation is high compliance and low resistance circulation. The pulmonary circulation is high compliance and low resistance circulation. Let's deal with it one by one. High compliance. You know, pulmonary vessels are said to be 24 times more compliant as compared to their systemic counterparts. They are highly distensible. When we say high compliance, we are referring to the distensibility of those vessels. So the pulmonary vessels are highly distensible. They are highly compliant. Why do we need this compliance? Look, the same amount of blood that is circulating throughout the body, now it is going to circulate through this short route of pulmonary circulation. You know, right ventricle to lungs and then back to the left side of the heart. And therefore, lungs have to accommodate large quantities of blood at any given point of time. And for that to occur, the lung vessels, they have to be more compliant. And therefore, what happens is, at any given point of time, almost 15% or 15 to 18% of the total blood volume is present in the lungs. So, lungs are called as reservoir of blood due to this reason that the vessels are highly compliant. They accommodate large quantities of blood at any given point of time. You know, out of the total blood volume, 18% almost will be present in the lungs at any given point of time. And therefore, lungs are called as reservoir of blood. It means if at certain time some other organ or tissue is requiring extra blood flow, extra oxygen, then lungs can divert their blood flow to that particular organ. In that sense, it's the reservoir. And the second point was, pulmonary circulation is a low pressure and low resistance circulation. Basically, pulmonary pressures represent the right-sided pressures. So let's first try to understand the right-sided versus left-sided pressures. You know, left ventricular pressure is almost 5 times greater as compared to right ventricular pressure. The point that I am trying to make is, the right ventricular pressures will be reflected in the pulmonary artery and left ventricular pressures will be reflected in the aorta and systemic arteries. So, since right ventricular pressures are 1/5 of that of the left ventricular pressure, therefore, even the pulmonary artery pressure, which is arising from the right ventricle itself, pulmonary artery and pulmonary vessels will have low pressure and low resistance. I am going to discuss the pulmonary vascular resistance in a separate video, but for now, let's first understand these pressures. Right ventricular pressure 25 systolic and 8 diastolic. This is the right ventricular pressure. I beg your pardon, right ventricular pressures are 25 systolic and 0 to 1 diastolic. Just make a small correction, 25 systolic and 0 diastolic. And if you see the left ventricular pressure, 125 systolic. So, the point is that the right ventricular pressure is 1/5 of that of the left ventricle. Low pressure. Well, but we are talking about the pulmonary artery and pulmonary circulation. So, look at the pulmonary artery pressure and pulmonary circulation pressure. Right ventricular pressure, systolic pressure 25. When right ventricle goes in systole, the pressure is reflected in the pulmonary artery. So, even pulmonary artery systolic pressure will be 25 mm of Hg. But when the right ventricle goes in diastole, its pressure precipitously falls to 0. From 25, it goes to 0, 0 to 1 mm of Hg, that's it. But pulmonary artery pressure will fall slowly from 25, okay. Imagine this, right ventricle went into systole, pressure 25 mm of Hg, same pressure got reflected in the pulmonary artery because the blood was ejected into the pulmonary artery. But when right ventricle goes in diastole, its pressure falls to 0 precipitously, very rapidly, but pulmonary artery pressure will fall slowly and its diastolic pressure will reach somewhere at 8 mm of Hg. So, pulmonary artery pressure 25 systolic, 8 diastolic. Pulmonary capillary pressure is in the range of 14 to 15 mm of Hg. Pulmonary capillary pressure 14 to 15 mm of Hg. There is also pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. Pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. Just now I told you about the pulmonary capillary pressure 14 to 15 mm of Hg. Then what is this pulmonary capillary wedge pressure? Well, it's left atrial pressure. Let's try to understand this. When I say pulmonary capillary pressure, it's the naturally occurring pressure in the pulmonary capillary, right? We said 14 to 15 mm of Hg. That's fine. That's a naturally occurring pressure of the pulmonary capillary. But what's pulmonary capillary wedge pressure is actually, it's reflective of left atrial pressure. Look, we want to measure the left atrial pressure. We are talking about the various pressures in the circulation and in the various chambers of the heart. Now, we want to measure the left atrial pressure. We have no means to reach the left atrium directly. You know, right atrial pressure can be measured over the internal jugular vein. We call it jugular venous pressure or jugular venous pulse. So, that's possible because from the right atrium up to the internal jugular vein, there are no valves, and therefore the pressure changes in the right atrium get reflected as such over the internal jugular vein. And therefore, we have some means to record right atrial pressure directly. But left atrium we cannot access directly. So, we have to have some indirect mean to measure the left atrial pressure, and that is in the form of pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. What is it? We introduce a catheter with a balloon tip. It's introduced into a vein and it's furthered to the right side of the heart. It's advanced further into the right side of the heart. And from the right ventricle, it will be further advanced into the pulmonary artery till such a time that the balloon tip will be fitted completely at one place in that pulmonary vessel. So it is snugly fitting into that region. It wedges, or it creates a wedge. It creates a wedge so that from that point onward up to the left atrium there is no flow. Please take this only as a diagrammatic representation to understand it in a simple way. This catheter was advanced and its balloon tip inflated. At one point, it snugly fits into that part of the pulmonary vessel so that beyond that point, up to the left atrium, there is no flow. So temporarily, the flow has been stopped. And if there is no flow, that means no pressure drop from that point to the left atrium. So after a few seconds, if you measure the pressure at this point where that wedge has been created, this pressure will be same as the left atrial pressure. Because the flow has been stopped, there would not be any pressure drop, no pressure change, and therefore this point and the pressure at this point will reflect the left atrial pressure. That is a concept of pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. But the point I am trying to make is that pulmonary capillary pressure naturally exists in the lungs, in the pulmonary capillaries. Pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, we have artificially created it just to measure the left atrial pressure. So it's in the range of 6 to 8 mm of Hg. We will discuss about it in the second video. Right, so that's these are the pressures in the pulmonary circulation. But the point was, it's a low pressure and low resistance circulation. The pulmonary circulation is high compliance circulation and it's a low pressure and low resistance circulation. Next point. Well, this point I have discussed in some previous video, so this will be just a revision. Hypoxia. Hypoxia elsewhere in the body leads to vasodilation. In the lungs, it leads to vasoconstriction. Yes, another special characteristic, special feature. It's quite understandable, and I have already mentioned the potassium channels in this regard in one previous video. So you can refer to that video once again. So keeping it short here, look, elsewhere in the body, if there is a hypoxic situation in some organ, some tissue, then the vessel leading to that tissue will dilate so that more and more blood can be brought into that region and the hypoxia in that region can be corrected. So that is beneficial out there, the hypoxia causing vasodilation everywhere else in the body. And this happens because of the fact that the vascular smooth muscle cell, means in the vessel wall there are those smooth muscle cells which are going to cause vasoconstriction. Their membranes have the potassium channel, which is ATP sensitive potassium channel. This channel is said to be responsible for causing this vasodilation. Whereas in the case of lungs, the vascular smooth muscle cell in the lungs, they have O2 sensitive potassium channel. I would again suggest you all to refer to that video where I have discussed the potassium channels, so that this will be further clarified. Well, O2 sensitive potassium channels in the vascular smooth muscle cells in the lungs, and this is said to cause vasoconstriction. Now, even this vasoconstriction is beneficial, it is helpful in the lungs, just as vasodilation was helpful everywhere else in the body. Look how. Let's say these are the two regions. I have shown two alveoli, but let's refer to them as two regions, different regions in the lungs. And there are blood vessels in the vicinity. Now, suppose these alveoli in this particular region, they are not functioning, let's assume. And it's a hypoxic situation over there. So, if there is no ventilation in those alveoli, then blood flow near them will be a waste. There is no ventilation, it's a hypoxic region, oxygen has not come there. So, then these vessels in the hypoxic region will constrict and the blood flow will be diverted to a better ventilated region where there is oxygen that can be picked up by this blood. So, hypoxia causing vasoconstriction in the lungs is beneficial for the sake of oxygenation of blood. That was another special feature related to the pulmonary circulation. And the final point is the zones of blood flow in the lungs. There are zones of blood flow seen in the lungs. This is again special, unique feature to the lungs. Why I say this is because normally if you see any organ, the blood flow is generally uniform throughout that organ. It's a uniform blood flow. In the lungs though, that's not the case. In the lungs you see different zones of blood flow, meaning blood flow differs in different regions of the lung. Let's understand this particular point and then we will move on to the next video or the next section of this discussion. First of all, try to understand that when I say zones of blood flow, these are not anatomically fixed zones, okay? They are functional zones. I mean, they can shift, they can change from one zone type to another. So, these are types of blood flow, one can say. Why these zones get created in the lungs particularly? The zones get created because of the interplay of two factors. There are two factors which are interacting, and it's their interplay which results in the zones, different zones. What are those two factors? A, hydrostatic factor, and B, the alveolar pressures or alveolar pressure. So, interaction of these two factors is responsible for causing different types of blood flow in different areas of the lung. Let's understand this. First of all, when I say hydrostatic factor, I am referring to the pressure in the blood vessels in the lungs. So, we are talking about the pressure or flow which is altered by the gravity, hydrostatic factor or gravity. And the alveolar pressure is the pressure inside the alveolus. Look, it's quite obvious to understand that a lung is a large structure, and heart is going to pump the blood in various areas of the lung. Now, when you go from apex to base, it's the gravity which starts acting, and therefore what happens is hydrostatic factor comes into play. So first point that you should understand is that as you go from apex to base, due to this hydrostatic factor or the gravity, the pressure inside the vessels in the lungs, it will go on increasing due to this hydrostatic factor. So that's one point that you should clearly understand, that at the apex, the heart is pumping. Well, again, this is diagrammatic representation. The vessels are not like this, but just to make it simplified, toward the apex, you can see now that apex of the lung is above the level of heart, and therefore heart is pumping the blood toward the apex, means it's against the gravity, and therefore pressure in the vessels at the apex will be less. Pressure in the vessels, blood vessels at the apex, pulmonary vessels, the pressure will be less, and that means, look, here is a pulmonary vasculature, okay, pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, and here is a pulmonary capillary, and alveolus or alveoli surrounding the pulmonary vessels. Okay. Now, if the pressure in the vessel, this is a blood vessel, if the pressure in the vessel is less and surrounding alveolar pressure is greater than that, higher than that, then what do you expect? What will happen? The alveoli will compress those vessels, isn't it? And the blood flow will be restricted. So that's the situation. You can now understand that in the at the apex of the lung, the pressure in the vessels is less, and therefore surrounding alveoli in that region, they will compress those vessels. And why the pressure inside the vessels is less? I told you, the hydrostatic factor. The blood is going against gravity, so naturally pressure will be less in those vessels. And the surrounding alveoli, you can see in this diagram, those surrounding alveoli will compress those vessels, and the blood flow will be limited, or at some places it may be even zero. No blood flow. That's possible. Yes, we will see that in some time. Now, as you go from apex to base, the pressure in the vessels will go on increasing. We have seen it just now, hydrostatic factor. And because of that, I mean, you are going towards gravity now. Heart is going to pump the blood towards gravity now. And due to that hydrostatic factor, pressure in the vessels near the base, the pressure will be very high, increased, greater than the apical pressure. And that means, look at the diagram again, if the pressure inside the vessel is much more than the surrounding alveolar pressure, then alveolus will not be able to compress this vessel. That means the blood flow will be unhindered. The blood flow cannot be stopped, because alveoli cannot compress this vessel, and that's because the pressure in the vessel is much higher as compared to apex, of course, relatively, and therefore that's the hydrostatic factor. That's where I said it's the interplay of these two factors: hydrostatic factor, the gravitational force that is causing the pressure to either be low or high, and the surrounding alveolar pressure. So you need to understand that blood vessels have a certain pressure and the surrounding alveoli have a certain pressure, and that's the interplay that I was referring to. Now, coming to the zones of blood flow. Zone 1 means no blood flow in that region. That's zone 1. And no blood flow means no gas exchange. Don't forget, we are talking about the pulmonary circulation, okay? So, it's the pulmonary blood flow is meant for what? It's meant for the gas exchange. So, if there is no blood flow, there would not be any gas exchange in that region. Zone 2 means intermittent blood flow. Intermittent blood flow. Let's try to understand. Now in zone 1 there was no blood flow. Why? Because all the time alveolar pressure was greater than the arterial pressure, pulmonary artery pressure, right? And therefore alveolus is going to compress those vessels completely. The capillaries will be compressed and there will be no blood flow. Intermittent blood flow means pulmonary artery and pulmonary capillary pressure will be greater than the surrounding alveolar pressure. But when? During systole. So that's why I am saying intermittent blood flow. What happens during systole is that pressure in the pulmonary artery will rise and pressure in the pulmonary capillary also will increase relatively, proportionately, and then the alveolar pressure will not be able to compress the vessels and therefore there will be blood flow. But during diastole, the alveoli will compress the vessels, alveolar pressure will compress the vessels and there will be no blood flow. So intermittent blood flow is particularly, you can understand that during systole, the pressure in the vessels increases and alveolus cannot compress it. So blood flow occurs intermittently. And zone 3, continuous blood flow. Continuous blood flow means during systole, during diastole, all the time there will be blood flow. Why? Because the pressure in the vessels is so high that even the pulmonary venous pressure is greater than the surrounding alveolar pressure. So no blood flow, intermittent blood flow, continuous blood flow. Okay, pressure in the vein is also higher than the alveolar pressure. So alveoli will not compress the vessels at any point, of time, whether it's systole or diastole, and therefore it will be a continuous blood flow. Now you can see that in the very narrow region at the apex, there is a possibility of zone 1. But most of the upper parts of the lung have zone 2. So focus on this region, there is either no blood flow or intermittent blood flow. And then the entire lung otherwise has zone 3 type of blood flow, right? Because we have already said that toward the base, the pressure in the vessels is much higher, therefore alveoli cannot compress those vessels, and zone 3, continuous blood flow. Okay. So that's, this is in the upright posture. Let me just add. This is in the upright posture, in the standing posture, in the upright posture. So what you need to understand is that in the upright posture, standing posture, blood flow is less at the apex. Okay, because in the upright posture, apex of the lung is above the level of heart. So pressure is less, flow is less, alveoli compress those vessels. Now, if the person goes to supine posture, what will happen? The person goes from upright to lying down posture or supine posture. Entire lung will get converted into zone 3 type of blood flow. Entire lung will have zone 3 continuous blood flow. And why is that? Because in the supine posture, supine position, no part of the lung is above the level of heart. It's either at the level of the heart or below. But heart does not have to pump against gravity to any part of the lung when the person is lying down. Okay, this you have to imagine. If this is the upright posture and heart is pumping against gravity, then in the lying down posture, that's not the case. Yeah, so heart does not have to pump the blood against gravity anywhere, and therefore then entire lung gets converted into zone 3 type of blood flow. That means blood flow at the apex increases when the person goes into lying down posture. One last point. This is related to the hydrostatic factor, which I explained just now, the change of posture and pressure increasing in some vessels. But what about the alveolar pressure? Can it change the zones of blood flow? And by now you have understood that when I said zones are not anatomically fixed zones. Yes, they are changeable. They can change. I'll give you another example. What happens in intermittent positive pressure ventilation, IPPV? In positive pressure ventilation, you are delivering ventilation under high pressure, and this is called as assisted ventilation. So, ventilation being given under high pressure. What will be the result? Result will be a very high alveolar pressure, right? Because you are delivering the ventilation under high pressure. So, alveolar pressure will increase tremendously in this positive pressure ventilation. And in that case, what will happen? It will compress the pulmonary vessels. So, the zone 3 is likely to get converted to zone 2, or zone 2 is likely to get converted to zone 1 because you are going to give it in the lying down posture. Therefore, but the point is, this is the only drawback of intermittent IPPV or any positive pressure ventilation being given to a patient, that it tends to compress the vessels and it tends to redistribute the blood flow. In some areas, therefore, there will be less blood flow. So, but that happened because of the alveolar pressure. So, I told you one factor which is related to the hydrostatic factor, which can influence the zones of blood flow, the posture. And the other influencing factor I told you was alveolar pressure. Yes, in the form of this positive pressure ventilation, it can alter the zones of blood flow. So, these are some of the special characteristics related to the pulmonary circulation. Now, the next video will be about pulmonary vascular resistance and pulmonary artery hypertension or pulmonary hypertension.